Most of the world have lined up against Moscow in the United Nations to demand it withdraw from Ukraine, as invading Russian forces renewed their bombardment of the country's second biggest city, menaced its capital, and besieged its strategic ports. Russia reported its military casualties for the first time since the invasion began last week, saying nearly 500 of its troops had been and almost 1,600 wounded. Ukraine insisted Russia's losses were far higher, but did not immediately disclose its own. Envoys from Ukraine and Russia are expected to meet on Thursday in Belarus for a second round of talks aimed at ending the fighting. But there appeared to be little common ground between the two sides. Live updates. Russia says hundreds of its soldiers. A rocket fragment lies on the ground next to a building of Ukrainian security service after a rocket attack in Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city, Ukraine, Wednesday, March 2, 2022. Russia's assault on Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city, continued Wednesday, with a Russian strike hitting the regional police and intelligence headquarters, according to the Ukrainian State Emergency Service. UN condemns Russian invasion. The UN General Assembly voted to demand that Russia stop its offensive and immediately withdraw all troops, with world powers and tiny island states alike condemning Moscow. The vote was 141 to 5, with 35 abstentions. Assembly resolutions aren't legally binding, but can have influence as a reflection of international opinion. The vote came after the 193-member Assembly convened its first emergency session since 1997. Countries that spoke up for Russia included Belarus, Cuba, North Korea, and Syria. Meanwhile, Russia pounded Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city with about 1.5 million people, with another round of aerial attacks that shattered buildings and lit up the skyline with balls of fire. At least 21 people were and 112 injured over the past day, said Oleksiy Hubov, head of the Kharkiv Regional Administration. Biden closes U.S. airspace to Russian flights in State of the Union. Firefighters extinguish a building of Ukrainian security service after a rocket attack in Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city, Ukraine, Wednesday, March 2, 2022. Russia's assault on Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city, continued Wednesday, with a Russian strike hitting the regional police and intelligence headquarters, according to the Ukrainian State Emergency Service. Supplies from Australia is headed for Ukraine, with the first plane load of military equipment and medical supplies leaving a Melbourne RAAF base. It comes after Prime Minister Scott Morrison announced Australia would join the EU in sending arms and aid to help Ukraine resist Russia's invasion. Mr. Morrison was due to hold talks with his Polish counterpart overnight from his COVID-19 isolation. Stalingrad of the 21st century. Several Russian planes were shot down over Kharkiv, according to Alexei Arestovich, a top advisor to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Kharkiv today is the Stalingrad of the 21st century, Arestovich said, invoking what is considered one of the most heroic moments in Russian history, the 5-month defense of the city from the Nazis during World War II. From his basement bunker, Kharkiv Mayor Igor Terekov told the BBC, "The city is united and we shall stand fast." Russian attacks, many with missiles, blew the roof off Kharkiv's 5-story regional police building and set the top floor on fire, and also hit the intelligence headquarters and a university building, according to officials and videos and photos released by Ukraine's State Emergency Service. Officials said residential buildings were also hit, but gave no details. Ukraine found itself under threat on other fronts as well. A huge, 64 kilometers long column of Russian tanks and other military vehicles stood outside Kiev, the capital, and Russian invaders pressed their assault on the strategic port cities of Kherson and Mariupol. Military, civilian casualty figures. 7 days into Russia's invasion, a refugee crisis unfolded on the European continent, with the UN saying that more than 870,000 people have fled Ukraine, and that the number could soon hit 1 million. The State Emergency Service reported that more than 2,000 civilians have been, but that could not be independently verified. A spokesman for the Russian Defense Ministry, Major General Igor Konashenkov, gave his side's military casualty figures, disputing as disinformation reports of much higher losses. Ukraine's leader claimed almost 6,000 Russian soldiers have been. Firefighters extinguish a building of Ukrainian security service after a rocket attack in Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city, Ukraine, Wednesday, March 2, 2022. Russia's assault on Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city, continued Wednesday, with a Russian strike hitting the regional police and intelligence headquarters, according to the Ukrainian State Emergency Service. 7 days into the war, roughly 874,000 people have fled Ukraine, and the UN Refugee Agency warned the number could cross the 1 million mark soon. The overall death toll was not clear, but Ukraine's State Emergency Service said more than 2,000 civilians have died. It was impossible to verify that claim. Countless others have taken shelter underground, as Russia continued its bombardment. Another attack came Wednesday on Kharkiv, a city with a population of about 1.5 million, and a strike reportedly hit a hospital in the country's north. Russian President Vladimir Putin's goals are not clear, but the West has warned he may be seeking to topple the government and install a Kremlin-friendly regime. Firefighters extinguish a building of Ukrainian security service after a rocket attack in Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city, Ukraine, Wednesday, March 2, 2022. Russia's assault on Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city, continued Wednesday, with a Russian strike hitting the regional police and intelligence headquarters, according to the Ukrainian State Emergency Service. Ukraine President slams terror campaign. Mr. Zelensky has decried Russia's attacks on civilian targets as a blatant terror campaign, while US President Joe Biden warned on Tuesday that if the Russian leader didn't pay a price for the invasion, the aggression wouldn't stop with one country. Russia ramped up its rhetoric, with Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov reminding the world about the country's vast nuclear arsenal. In an interview with Al Jazeera, he said, "A third world war will be nuclear and devastating," according to Russian news sites. Ukrainian soldiers aboard an armored vehicle guard a key road in Kiev. In the northern city of Chernihiv, 2 cruise missiles hit a hospital, according to the Ukrainian UNIAN news agency, which quoted the health administration chief, Serhiy Pivovar, as saying authorities were working to determine the casualty toll. In besieged Mariupol, at least 1 teenager died and 2 more were wounded by apparent Russian shelling. The boys' families told the Associated Press the attack came while they were playing soccer near a school. Local militiamen help an old woman crossing a bridge destroyed by artillery as she tries to flee on the outskirts of Kiev, Ukraine, Wednesday, March 2, 2022. Russian forces have escalated their attacks on crowded cities in what Ukraine's leader called a blatant campaign of terror. Mariupol Mayor Vadim Boychenko said the attacks there had been relentless. "We cannot even take the wounded from the streets, from houses and apartments today, since the shelling does not stop," he was quoted by the Interfax news agency as saying. Bomb shelters turned to maternity wards as fighting rages in Kiev.